It was late in the evening when the city lights had already taken over the fading sunset. The streets were quieter than usual, with only a few cars passing by and some shopkeepers pulling down their shutters. Mr. Arjun, a well-known businessman in the city, was returning from a grand charity event that he had been invited to. He was seated comfortably in the back seat of his luxury car, looking outside the tinted glass, lost in his own thoughts. The event had been like many others he attended: bright lights, applause, polite handshakes, and endless speeches about helping the needy. He had even signed a generous check for the organization. People had praised him for his donation, telling him what a kind-hearted man he was. Arjun smiled at those words during the event, but deep down, he wondered if giving away money in a decorated hall truly made a difference in people's lives. As the car moved slowly along a narrow street that was usually busy in the daytime, Arjun noticed something unusual. His eyes, trained to catch details, spotted a figure curled up against the wall of a closed shop. At first, he thought it was just another homeless person trying to survive the cold night. But something inside him made him look again, and this time his heart skipped a beat. The dim street light fell softly on the person's face. Arjun leaned forward, squinting his eyes, trying to be sure. His driver noticed his sudden interest and asked politely, "Sir, shall I drive faster? It's not the safest area." Arjun shook his head. "Wait, slow down," he said in a firm but calm voice. The car crawled closer, and now Arjun's eyes widened in disbelief. The woman lying on the pavement, trying to sleep on nothing but a piece of cloth, was none other than Sunita, his maid who had been working in his house for almost 5 years. For a moment, he couldn't believe what he was seeing. Sunita, the same woman who woke up early every morning, arrived at his house on time, cleaned every corner with dedication, cooked simple meals for the staff, and always greeted everyone with respect. There she was, shivering on the cold street like she had no home. "Stop the car," Arjun said quickly. The driver obeyed at once, pulling over to the side. Arjun opened the door and stepped out. The night air was colder than he expected, and the sound of distant barking dogs echoed in the background. He walked towards the sleeping figure, his polished shoes making soft sounds on the uneven road. As he came closer, his heart grew heavier. Sunita's thin sari was hardly enough to protect her from the night chill. Her arms were folded tightly across her chest, and her face showed the tiredness of someone who had been fighting silent battles for too long. Beside her, there was a small bag that looked old and worn out. It seemed to hold all her belongings. "Sunita," Arjun said softly, almost unsure if he should wake her. Hearing her name, Sunita stirred, her eyes slowly opening. At first, she looked frightened, as if caught doing something wrong. But when she recognized her employer standing in front of her, she quickly sat up, embarrassed and nervous. "Sir, you?" "Here," she stammered, adjusting her sari and lowering her eyes. Arjun was still shocked. "Sunita, what are you doing here? Why are you sleeping on the street?" His voice carried both concern and disbelief. She tried to smile, but it was weak and unconvincing. "Nothing, sir. I was just resting here for a while. I'll be fine." But Arjun wasn't satisfied with her answer. He had seen enough in his life to know when someone was hiding pain. He crouched down a little, so he could look directly into her eyes. "Resting? At this hour? On the street? This is not just resting, Sunita. Tell me the truth. What's going on?" Her eyes filled with tears, but she quickly turned her face away. She didn't want to cry in front of him. She had always carried herself with dignity, even though she was a maid. But tonight, the weight of her situation seemed too heavy to hide. "Sir, please, don't worry about me. I'll manage," she whispered, her voice trembling. Arjun felt a pang in his chest. Here was a woman who worked hard every single day, taking care of others, yet had no place to rest her own head. The contrast between the luxurious charity event he had just attended and this real-life scene in front of him hit him like a storm. "Come on, Sunita," he said gently. "Stand up. You cannot stay here. It's too dangerous, and too cold. I won't allow it." Sunita hesitated. She looked around, ashamed, as if the street itself was a witness to her helplessness. "Sir, I don't want to trouble you," she said. "I'll find a way. Tomorrow I'll be at work as usual." But Arjun wasn't listening to her excuses. He knew there was more to the story, and he wasn't going to walk away leaving her like this. "Sunita," he said firmly but kindly, "you work in my home. You take care of my family's needs. And here you are, without even a roof over your head. This is not right. Tell me honestly, why are you here?" The tears she had been holding back finally rolled down her cheeks. She lowered her head, covering her face with her hands, as if ashamed of her own tears. "Sir, I didn't want anyone to know. My house owner asked us to leave because we could not pay the rent. My husband, he lost his small job. I tried to cover it up, but we had no choice. Tonight I had nowhere to go." Her words came out slowly, each one heavier than the last. Arjun listened in silence, his heart growing heavier. He had always seen her as a strong woman, someone who carried herself with pride despite her simple life. To hear that she had been forced onto the streets shook him deeply. Sunita quickly wiped her tears and tried to smile again, though her eyes betrayed her pain. "But don't worry, sir. It's just for tonight. I'll find something tomorrow. Please don't think about me." Arjun took a deep breath. The words from the charity speeches earlier in the evening echoed in his head about helping the poor, about uplifting lives, about being human. Yet here, in front of him, was someone he knew personally, someone who had served him loyally, and she was living a nightmare. In that moment, he realized the true meaning of charity was not about writing big checks in fancy halls, but about noticing the struggles of the people around you. "Sunita," he said softly but with determination, "get up. You are not spending another night here. Come with me." She looked at him with wide, hesitant eyes. "Sir. Don't argue," he said gently. "You are like family. And family does not sleep on the streets." For the first time that night, Sunita allowed herself to breathe a little easier. She stood up slowly, clutching her small bag close to her chest, still unsure if she deserved this kindness. But Arjun had already made up his mind. As he guided her towards the car, she kept her eyes lowered, her heart heavy with both gratitude and shame. But somewhere inside, a small spark of hope flickered. Perhaps things would not always be this dark. Arjun opened the car door for her himself, something he never usually did. Sunita hesitated for a moment, then stepped inside. The warmth of the car felt almost unreal after the biting cold of the street. As the car pulled away, leaving behind the lonely pavement, Arjun looked at her again. He still couldn't believe how close he had come to passing by without noticing. Fate had slowed his car at the right moment. And now, he silently promised himself he would not let this loyal woman suffer in silence anymore. The city lights blurred outside the window, but inside the car, something had changed. A new chapter was about to begin in both their lives, one that neither of them had expected when the night began. The car moved silently through the half-empty streets. Inside, there was a heavy silence between Arjun and Sunita. She sat quietly in the back seat, her eyes fixed on her lap, clutching her small cloth bag like it was the only thing she owned in the world. Arjun glanced at her from time to time, his heart restless. He wanted to ask her more questions, but he also didn't want to make her feel embarrassed. Finally, after a few minutes, he spoke gently. "Sunita, tell me the truth. How long have you been living like this?" She hesitated. Her lips parted, but no words came out at first. She looked at the driver, then at the ground again. "Sir, please. I don't want to trouble you with my problems. Arjun sighed softly. You're not troubling me. But I cannot sit quietly after what I saw tonight. You've worked in my home for 5 years. You've always been honest and hardworking. I need to know what really happened. Her hands tightened around her bag. For a few moments, the sound of the moving car filled the space. Then, slowly, her voice broke the silence. It started 2 months ago, sir, she said, her eyes still lowered. My husband used to work in a small workshop. It was not much, but it was enough to pay the rent for our one-room house and manage food for our children. Then one day, the workshop closed down. The owner left without paying the workers their full salary. From that day, everything started going wrong. Arjun listened carefully. Every word she spoke felt like a stone placed on his chest. She continued, her voice soft but heavy. At first, I thought we would manage. I still had my job at your home. My husband kept searching for work, but weeks passed, and nothing came. We had some little savings, but it finished so quickly. I used some of my wages for food, some for rent, and tried to keep the children in school. But then the landlord gave us a warning. He said if we couldn't pay the rent on time, we would have to leave. Sunita's voice trembled, but she forced herself to go on. I begged him for more time. I promised him that I would pay soon. But he didn't listen. Last week, he told us to leave the house. We had no choice. My husband took the children to his cousin's place, but they couldn't all stay there for long. I didn't want to tell anyone. So I carried a few clothes in this bag and thought I could sleep outside for a night or two until we figured something out. Her hands shook slightly as she held her bag closer. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she tried to hide them. I didn't want you to know, sir. I didn't want to lose my dignity. Every day, I came to your house and did my work as usual. I didn't want you or anyone else to think less of me. Arjun's throat tightened. He had always admired Sunita's discipline and honesty, but never once had he thought she might be silently carrying such a burden. To think that while she cooked meals in his home and kept everything in order, she herself had no roof over her head, it was a painful truth he struggled to accept. Sunita, he said softly. Why didn't you tell me earlier? Why did you keep this inside? She wiped her tears quickly and tried to smile, though her lips quivered. Sir, I didn't want to look like I was begging. I've always wanted to earn what I get. I thought, maybe tomorrow would be better. Maybe something would change. I didn't want to be a burden. Her words cut deeply into Arjun's heart. For years, he had seen her as just one of the staff, but tonight he saw her as a woman fighting silently against life's cruel turns. She was not asking for sympathy. She only wanted to stand with dignity. Arjun leaned back in his seat, his mind racing. Just a few hours ago, he had stood on a stage at a charity event, donating lakhs of rupees, listening to applause from people who hardly knew him. And here was Sunita, someone he saw every single day, who had given her loyalty and service to his household, and yet she was suffering in silence. The irony hit him hard. The car slowed as they reached closer to his home. Arjun looked at her again, her face pale from tiredness, her eyes red from holding back tears. He realized this was more than just a financial problem. It was about dignity, respect, and survival. Sunita, he said in a calm, reassuring tone. You should never have to go through this alone. You have always been honest and faithful in your work. You should have told me sooner. She shook her head gently. Sir, you are a big man. You already have so many responsibilities. Why would you care about a maid's problems? Her words hurt him more than she knew. He turned to face her directly. Don't ever say that again. You are not just a maid. You are a human being with feelings, with a family, with struggles. And you are part of my household. That means I share some responsibility for your well-being too. For the first time, Sunita lifted her eyes to look at him. There was disbelief in her gaze, but also a glimmer of relief. She had carried her burden alone for so long that hearing these words felt almost unreal. By now, the car had stopped in front of Arjun's large house. The gates opened, and the vehicle rolled inside. The grand home stood glowing under the night lights, its tall walls and shining windows a sharp contrast to the dark street where Sunita had been lying just minutes earlier. The driver parked the car. Arjun stepped out and held the door open for Sunita. She hesitated, feeling out of place in this setting. But Arjun encouraged her with a small nod. "Come inside. You are safe here." She followed him, her steps slow and unsure. As she entered the house, she looked around with a mixture of awe and sadness. She had cleaned these very floors many times, but tonight she was stepping in not as a worker, but as someone who needed help. Arjun led her to a quiet room. "You will rest here tonight," he said firmly. "Tomorrow we will talk more. But for now, you need sleep." Sunita tried to protest. "Sir, I don't want to disturb your family. I can sleep in the servants' quarters." Arjun shook his head. "No. You will stay here, where you are comfortable. Don't argue with me on this." Her eyes filled with fresh tears. No one had spoken to her like this in a long time, not with pity, but with respect. She nodded slowly and sat down on the edge of the bed, her tired body sinking into the mattress. As Arjun stepped out, he paused for a moment at the door. Watching her sit there, clutching her bag like it was her whole world, he made a silent decision. This was not going to end with just giving her a room for the night. Something had to change for her, permanently. Sunita, left alone, lay back on the soft bed. For the first time in weeks, she felt the comfort of a roof and a pillow. But her mind was restless. She wondered if she had done the right thing by revealing her truth. She feared what tomorrow might bring. Yet, deep inside, a quiet hope stirred. Maybe, just maybe, her life was about to turn in a direction she never imagined. And in the other room, Arjun sat quietly, thinking about how fate had brought him face to face with this hidden struggle. He knew he couldn't ignore it anymore. The discovery of Sunita's truth had shaken something deep inside him. Tomorrow, decisions would have to be made, decisions that could change not just her life, but his too. The next morning arrived with soft rays of sunlight streaming through the tall windows of Arjun's home. The birds outside chirped happily, but inside Sunita's heart there was a mix of nervousness and relief. She woke up slowly, still half in disbelief that she had spent the night under a proper roof, on a bed far more comfortable than the hard pavement she had grown used to. For a few moments, she simply sat on the edge of the bed, holding her small cloth bag close, as if it was a part of her. Her thoughts wandered to her children, who were staying with her husband's cousin. She worried about them, about their breakfast, about whether they had clean clothes for school. The worry never left her, even in the safest places. Just then, there was a gentle knock on the door. Sunita quickly stood up, adjusting her sari, and opened the door slightly. It was Arjun's wife, Meera, standing there with a kind smile. In her hands, she held a tray with a steaming cup of tea and some biscuits. "Good morning, Sunita," Meera said warmly. "Please have this. You must be tired." Sunita was surprised and lowered her eyes. "Madam, you shouldn't trouble yourself. I am fine." Meera placed the tray on the table and looked at her kindly. "This is not trouble. You've been taking care of this house for years. Let us take care of you for once." Tears pricked Sunita's eyes again, but she quickly nodded and whispered, "Thank you, madam." After Meera left, Sunita sipped the tea slowly. The warmth spread through her body, calming her slightly. But her mind still raced with questions. Why was Sir helping her? What would happen now? Would she still have her job? Or would they send her away after a few days of kindness? Meanwhile, Arjun was in his study, deep in thought. The image of Sunita lying on the street the previous night was still fresh in his mind. He could not shake it away. He had spent years building his wealth, attending high-profile events, and donating to causes, but never once had he truly looked into the life of someone who worked so closely with him. The realization left him restless. He decided it was time to act, not just out of sympathy, but out of a sense of responsibility. He called Sunita into the study after she had finished her tea. She entered hesitantly, clutching her bag again, as if afraid someone would take it away. She bowed slightly. "Sir, did you call me?" Arjun gestured for her to sit. "Yes, Sunita. I want to talk to you." She sat on the edge of the chair, her posture stiff, her eyes lowered. Arjun noticed how uncomfortable she felt, so he softened his voice. "You told me some of your problems last night. But I want to hear everything. Don't hide anything this time. Only then can I think of how to help." Sunita hesitated for a long moment. But something in his tone reassured her. Slowly, she began to speak, telling him everything she had kept hidden for weeks. She spoke of the workshop closing down, her husband's endless search for work, the landlord's harshness, and how she tried to stretch her small salary to cover food, rent, and school fees. She admitted how she would sometimes skip meals so her children could eat. Her voice cracked as she mentioned her children. "Sir, I want them to study. I don't want them to live the same life I did. But last week, the school threatened to stop them from attending because I couldn't pay the fees. That hurt me more than losing the house. I can sleep anywhere, but I don't want my children to lose their future." By now, tears were running freely down her cheeks. She quickly tried to wipe them away, embarrassed. "Forgive me, sir. I didn't mean to trouble you with all this. I should not complain." Arjun's heart ached as he listened. He saw the strength in her words. This was not just a woman asking for help. This was a mother fighting for her children's future. "Sunita," he said firmly, "you are not complaining. You are sharing your truth. And I respect that. You have been working for me for years, never once asking for more than your wages. I cannot ignore this. From today, things will be different for you." She looked up at him, startled. "Different, sir? What do you mean?" Arjun leaned forward. "First, you will not live on the streets again. I will arrange proper accommodation for you and your family. Second, your children's school fees will be paid. They will not miss even a single class. Third, I will increase your salary. You have earned it many times over with your honesty and hard work." Sunita stared at him, her eyes wide with disbelief. She shook her head quickly. "No, sir, please. I cannot accept so much. I only told you my problems because you asked. I don't want charity. Let me work and earn what I deserve." Arjun smiled softly. "This is not charity, Sunita. This is justice. You have already earned this. I am not giving you something for free. I am simply giving back what you deserve for your loyalty and service. You have been like family to us. And family should not suffer silently." Her lips trembled as she tried to speak, but no words came out. She had never expected such kindness. For years, she had thought her work was invisible, just part of the background of someone else's home. To be seen and respected in this way was overwhelming. Arjun continued, his voice thoughtful. "Last night taught me something important. I realized that true kindness is not in writing big checks at parties, but in noticing the people around you. If I cannot care for those who are close to me, then what is the use of all my wealth?" His words touched Sunita deeply. She folded her hands, tears flowing freely now. "Sir, I don't know how to thank you. I don't have the right words. All I can say is, may God bless you and your family." Arjun stood and gently gestured for her to stand as well. "No need for thanks, Sunita. Just promise me one thing: never hide your struggles again." If there is ever a problem, come to me. I cannot promise to solve everything, but I will never let you feel alone. For the first time in many days, Sunita felt a weight lifting from her heart. It was as though the dark clouds that had covered her life were slowly moving away, making space for sunlight. That day became the turning point not just in her life, but in Arjun's too. For Sunita, it meant hope, security, and dignity. For Arjun, it meant understanding the true meaning of compassion. Later that afternoon, Arjun made arrangements for a small rented apartment near his house for Sunita and her family. He personally spoke to the school principal and paid the fees for her children. He even found a part-time job for her husband through one of his contacts. When Sunita moved into the new home that evening with her family, her children's eyes sparkled with joy. For them, it felt like a palace compared to the uncertainty they had faced. Her husband, though embarrassed at first, was deeply grateful too. That night, as she tucked her children into bed, Sunita thought about everything that had happened in the last 24 hours. From sleeping on the cold street to resting in a safe home, her life had changed in ways she could never have imagined. She whispered a silent prayer of gratitude not just for the help she received, but for the respect that came with it. And in his own room, Arjun sat by the window, looking out at the city lights. His thoughts were calm, his heart lighter. He knew he had done something right not for the world to see, but for his own conscience. Helping Sunita was not an act of charity. It was an act of humanity. The days that followed were filled with quiet but powerful changes in Sunita's life. For the first time in many weeks, she woke up without the fear of where she would sleep that night. The small rented apartment Arjun had arranged for her family was not luxurious, but to Sunita and her children, it felt like a blessing. The rooms were simple, the walls freshly painted, and there was enough space for everyone to rest peacefully. Her children, Priya and Rohit, ran from one room to another, giggling with excitement. They had never lived in a place that felt this safe. Sunita stood in the doorway, watching them with tears in her eyes. For so long, she had worried about their future, but now, seeing them laugh freely, she felt as if a heavy burden had been lifted from her shoulders. Arjun didn't just stop at arranging the home. He took personal steps to ensure her family's life became more stable. One morning, he called Sunita and said, "Bring your husband to my office tomorrow. I want to meet him." The next day, Sunita's husband, Rajesh, stood nervously in Arjun's office. He was a humble man with kind eyes, though his face carried the marks of stress from months of joblessness. Arjun greeted him warmly, offered him a chair, and listened carefully as Rajesh explained his past work experience at the workshop. After hearing him out, Arjun nodded. "You have skills. I know someone who runs a printing press nearby. They're looking for reliable workers. I'll recommend you. It won't make you rich overnight, but it will be steady work." Rajesh's eyes filled with gratitude. He stood up and folded his hands. "Sir, I don't know how to thank you. You've given my family more than we could dream of." Arjun smiled and placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "No need for thanks. Just do your work honestly. That's all I ask." True to his word, Arjun made a phone call, and within a week, Rajesh started his new job at the printing press. For him, the joy of earning again was far greater than the money itself. He returned home each day with a sense of dignity, no longer feeling helpless. Meanwhile, Arjun had also visited the school where Sunita's children studied. He met the principal and explained the situation. "These children are bright," he said firmly. "Do not let financial problems stand in the way of their education. Their fees will be taken care of." The principal, who respected Arjun deeply, nodded with a smile. "Don't worry, sir. We will make sure they continue their studies without interruption." When Sunita heard this news, she broke down in tears. She hugged her children tightly, whispering, "Now you can study without fear. Promise me you will work hard and make something of your life." The children, still young but wise enough to understand their mother's struggles, nodded earnestly. At home, Sunita also noticed small but meaningful gestures from Arjun and his family. Meera, his wife, would often send groceries, clothes, and sometimes even books for the children. But she never made it feel like charity. Instead, she would say, "I bought some extra rice," or "I thought Rohit might enjoy this book." Sunita appreciated that. It allowed her to accept the help without feeling ashamed. One evening, Arjun invited Sunita and her family for dinner at his home. Sunita was hesitant at first. "Sir, we are simple people. I don't know if we belong at your dining table." Arjun shook his head firmly. "You are part of our family now. And family eats together." That evening, Sunita's children sat at the same table as Arjun's family, their eyes wide with wonder at the neatly arranged plates and shining cutlery. The children were shy at first, but soon, with Meera's gentle encouragement, they began to relax. Priya shared how she wanted to become a teacher, while Rohit shyly admitted he loved drawing and wanted to become an artist. Arjun listened with genuine interest, nodding and smiling. "Then you must follow your dreams," he told them kindly. "Work hard, and nothing will stop you." For Sunita, that evening was unforgettable. She had never imagined her children would be treated with such respect in a wealthy household. She sat quietly, her heart overflowing with gratitude, silently praying for the family that had embraced her so warmly. But Arjun was not done yet. He began thinking on a larger scale. If Sunita, who worked so closely with him, could be facing such struggles silently, how many others like her might be suffering without anyone knowing? The thought stayed with him. He decided that his responsibility did not end with just helping one family. It was time to create something bigger. One morning, he called a meeting with his business advisors. "I want to start a welfare program," he announced. "For domestic workers, drivers, guards, and people like them. They dedicate their lives to serving households, yet they often live in the most difficult conditions. We must provide them with security, whether it's healthcare, education for their children, or a small fund for emergencies." His advisors looked at each other in surprise. This was unusual for a businessman known more for his corporate projects than social initiatives. But they could see the determination in his eyes. One of them asked, "Sir, what inspired this idea?" Arjun paused for a moment before answering. "I saw someone I knew, someone loyal to my household, sleeping on the street. It shook me. I realized we often overlook the people closest to us. I don't want to make that mistake again." The team began working on the plan, and within weeks, Arjun launched a small welfare fund for household workers connected to his company and network. It included free evening classes for their children, a small healthcare scheme, and emergency housing support. When the news spread, people were surprised. Many praised his initiative, saying it was rare for someone of his stature to think so deeply about workers who were usually invisible in society. Sunita, when she heard about the program, felt a mix of pride and humility. She never thought her struggles would inspire something that could help so many others. She told her children, "See, even our pain was not wasted. Because of what we went through, others will have an easier life." Her children listened carefully, their young hearts filled with respect for both their mother and for Arjun, who had stood by them. In the weeks that followed, Sunita's life changed in ways she could hardly believe. She no longer walked to work with the heaviness of hidden worries. Instead, she carried herself with quiet confidence. At Arjun's home, she worked with the same dedication, but now there was a lightness in her heart. One afternoon, when Arjun returned from a business trip, he found the garden looking especially neat and colorful. Sunita had spent her free time planting flowers there. "I thought the house should look as bright as it feels now," she said with a small smile. Arjun looked at the garden, then at her, and nodded. "It does. Thank you, Sunita." That simple moment captured the essence of everything that had changed. A relationship that had once been just employer and maid had transformed into something deeper, built on respect, gratitude, and shared humanity. Arjun's actions were not about showing off his wealth. They were about restoring dignity to someone who had lost it, and in doing so, he found a new meaning in his own life. For Sunita, the turning point had given her not just a home or financial support, but something far greater: hope, respect, and the courage to dream again. Weeks turned into months, and the memory of that cold night when Arjun had found Sunita on the street slowly faded into the past. But for both of them, the lessons from that moment remained fresh in their hearts. What had begun as a single act of kindness had grown into something far greater, touching not just Sunita's life but the lives of many others as well. Sunita's days slowly settled into a new rhythm. Every morning, she woke up in her small but secure apartment, cooked breakfast for her children, and packed their school bags with care. The sound of their laughter as they left for school filled her heart with joy. It was a simple life, but it was filled with dignity and hope. She no longer feared the landlord's angry voice or the uncertainty of where they would sleep. For her, that alone felt like a treasure. At work, she continued with her duties, sweeping the floors, preparing meals, and keeping the house in order. But she carried herself differently now. Her steps were lighter, her face calmer. There was no longer the hidden heaviness in her eyes. Other staff members noticed the change and often asked her what had happened. She would only smile and say softly, "Sometimes, life gives us a second chance when we least expect it." Her children, Priya and Rohit, were doing well in school. Priya loved reading and often shared stories with her younger brother, while Rohit filled pages with drawings of houses, gardens, and people. One evening, he proudly showed Sunita a sketch of their new home with bright flowers outside the window. "This is our happy house," he said. Sunita hugged him tightly, tears of joy rolling down her cheeks. Rajesh, her husband, too, was slowly rebuilding his confidence. His work at the printing press was steady, and he felt proud to contribute again. Though his income was modest, the respect he earned from honest work meant everything to him. At night, he would sit with Sunita and share stories from his workplace, sometimes laughing, sometimes worrying, but always grateful that they had been given another chance. For Arjun, life also changed in ways he had not expected. He had always been known as a successful businessman, respected in social circles, admired for his wealth. But after what happened with Sunita, he found himself thinking less about applause and more about impact. He often looked at his large house, his expensive car, his well-decorated office, and asked himself, "What is all this worth if it does not touch lives directly?" He began spending more time on his welfare program for workers. He visited the evening classes for children of maids and drivers, sitting among them, listening to their dreams. Some wanted to become doctors, some teachers, some engineers. Their innocent hopes filled him with both pride and responsibility. One evening, during one of these visits, a young boy stood up shyly and said, "Sir, thank you for giving us books. Before this, I shared one with 3 others. Now I have my own." Arjun smiled, but deep inside, he felt humbled. Such a small thing a book meant so much to a child. He realized that change didn't always come through grand gestures, sometimes, it came through the smallest acts done with sincerity. Word about Arjun's initiative began to spread in the city. Some people praised him openly, while others dismissed it as just another way for a rich man to look good. But Arjun didn't care about opinions anymore. He knew in his heart why he was doing it, and that was enough. One quiet evening, Arjun sat with Meera in their garden. She looked at him thoughtfully and said, "I've seen a change in you. You look more peaceful these days. Less restless." Arjun smiled softly. "Maybe because I finally understand what peace really means. It's not in numbers on a bank sheet. It's in knowing you've touched someone's life in a way that matters." Meera reached out and held his hand. "I'm proud of you. What you did for Sunita was more than help, it was respect. And respect is worth more than money." Arjun nodded slowly, thinking about Sunita. She had taught him a lesson without even realizing it. Her silent struggles had opened his eyes more than any speech or book ever could. Sunita, too, often reflected on everything that had happened. On her way back from work one evening, she walked past the very street where she had once slept on the pavement. She stopped for a moment, staring at the spot under the flickering street light. A chill ran down her spine as she remembered the cold, the fear, the hopelessness of that night. And then she thought of Arjun, stopping his car, calling her name, refusing to let her remain invisible. She whispered a quiet prayer of thanks and walked on, her steps steady. Her neighbors in the new apartment often asked her, "How did you manage this change, Sunita? What miracle happened?" She would smile gently and reply, "Sometimes, a kind heart can be more powerful than any miracle." She never exaggerated the story, never painted herself as pitiful, but always spoke with dignity. As months passed, festivals arrived. That year, for Diwali, Sunita decorated her small home with diyas and colorful rangoli. Her children were thrilled to light crackers for the first time in years. Arjun and Meera visited them that evening with sweets. The children ran to greet them, their faces glowing with happiness. When Sunita handed Arjun a small box of homemade sweets she had prepared herself, she said softly, "Sir, this is not much, but it is made with love." Arjun accepted it with both hands, smiling warmly. "This is worth more than anything else," he said. That night, as the fireworks lit up the sky, both families sat together, laughing and talking. It was a simple celebration, but for Sunita, it was the brightest Diwali she had ever experienced. Later, when everyone returned home, Arjun stood at his window, watching the lights in the distance. He thought of how one unexpected moment a car slowing down near a street had changed not just one life, but many. He realized life often gave us chances to make a difference, but most of the time, people were too busy to notice. He promised himself he would never again overlook such chances. For Sunita, the reflection was equally deep. She often told her children, "Never forget where we came from. Never forget the kindness that lifted us up. And when you grow up, always help someone who needs it, no matter how small the help may be." Her children listened carefully, their young hearts already shaped by the lessons of their mother's struggles and Arjun's generosity. As time went on, the bond between the two families grew stronger. It was no longer just about work and wages. It was about respect, trust, and shared humanity. And so, the story that began on a cold street under a weak streetlight ended in warmth, dignity, and hope. It was not just the story of a millionaire helping his maid. It was the story of how kindness could transform lives, how respect could heal wounds, and how sometimes, the greatest wealth lies not in money, but in compassion.